My name is Jenna and I'm 25 years old now. I work as a marketing specialist at Reynolds Brooks, handling campaigns for some pretty big clients. My coworkers think I've got it all figured out: nice house, decent salary, even a promotion on the horizon. But nobody really knows my story. Nobody knows how I got here. To understand who I am, we need to go back 15 years. Back to when I was just a 10-year-old kid living with people who were supposed to be my parents. I always knew something was off in our house. While my friends would run to their moms after school for hugs, my mother would just nod and ask if I had homework. When other kids got tucked in at night with bedtime stories, I got a simple "Good night, Jenna" from the doorway. Frank and Linda Williams, my parents, they did the basics. I never went hungry. I always had clean clothes. But that was it. "Did you finish your dinner?" Linda would ask from across our kitchen table, not looking up from her magazine. "Yes," I'd answer. "Then put your plate in the dishwasher and go finish your homework." "No, how was your day?" No interest in what I was learning, nothing. Frank was the same way. He'd come home from work, grunt a hello in my direction, and then disappear into his study until dinner. After meals, he'd go back to his study or he and Linda would talk about their next trip. Oh, the trips. They took so many trips. At least once every couple of months, they'd pack their bags and leave me with their friends, the Clarks. Tom and Sarah Clark were a childless couple who lived about 20 minutes away. They were my parents' only real friends, as far as I could tell. My parents didn't talk to relatives. I didn't even know if I had any grandparents or aunts or uncles. They barely socialized with neighbors, but they loved the Clarks. And honestly, I loved the Clarks too. Those weekends when my parents would drop me off at their house were the best times of my childhood. Their house smelled like fresh-baked cookies and felt warm in ways my house never did. Tom would play board games with me. Sarah would brush my hair and tell me stories. They'd take me to the park, to the movies, to the ice cream shop. "Why can't I go to Europe with my parents?" I asked Sarah once when I was 9. She looked sad for a moment before answering. "Your parents, they just like to travel a certain way. Adult way." She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "But we love having you here, you know that, right?" I nodded, but inside I wondered what was wrong with me that my own parents didn't want me around. When my parents returned from their trips, they never brought me anything. Not a keychain, not a postcard, nothing. Other kids at school would show off little trinkets their parents brought back from business trips. I just stayed quiet during those show and tell moments. That's why I nearly fell over from shock when, approaching my 10th birthday, my mother actually mentioned a party. "We're thinking of having some people over for your birthday next week," she said casually over breakfast. "Would you like to invite some of your classmates?" I stared at her, my spoon halfway to my mouth. "For my birthday?" "Yes, Jenna, that's what I said." She sounded irritated, like I was being deliberately dense. Yes. I'd like that." I tried to contain my excitement, afraid she might change her mind. To my amazement, they actually went through with it. They bought a cake, hung up balloons, and let me invite 5 girls from my class. It wasn't extravagant, but it was the first real birthday party I'd ever had. For a few hours, our cold house felt almost normal. "Make a wish, Jenna," Frank said as I stood before my cake with its 10 glowing candles. I closed my eyes and wished that things would stay this way. That maybe my parents had finally changed. I should have known better. 3 days after my party, I came home from school to find the Clarks in our living room. They were talking quietly with my parents, their expressions serious. I caught bits and pieces as I hung up my backpack. "The paperwork is final, adoption process, tell her soon." They stopped talking when they noticed me. Sarah gave me a strained smile. "Hi, sweetie, how was school?" "Fine," I answered, suddenly nervous. "What's going on?" "Nothing for you to worry about," Linda said dismissively. "Go do your homework." A few days later, I found out exactly what I needed to worry about. I got off the school bus and walked home like any other day. When I opened the front door, I stopped dead in my tracks. In the middle of our living room was a pile of luggage. My luggage. My clothes, my books, my few toys, all packed up and waiting. Frank and Linda were sitting on the couch. The Clarks were standing nearby, looking uncomfortable. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice small. Linda stood up and straightened her blouse. "Jenna, from today on, you'll be living with Tom and Sarah. They're your parents now." Just like that, no preparation, no explanation, no apology. "I don't understand," I said, feeling tears well up in my eyes. Frank sighed impatiently. "It's very simple. We're not your parents anymore. Tom and Sarah are adopting you. They'll take care of you from now on." "But why?" Tears were streaming down my face now. "Did I do something wrong?" "Oh, for goodness sake," Linda grimaced. "The tears aren't going to change anything. It's time for you to go." And that was it, 10 years of cold parenting culminating in complete abandonment. Tom put his arm around my shoulders while Sarah picked up some of my bags. I sobbed as I was guided out to their car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't want to see if Frank and Linda were watching me leave or if they'd already moved on with their lives. Tom and Sarah's house felt different that night. I'd been there dozens of times before, but never knowing it would be my permanent home. Sarah showed me to the guest room, my room now, where they'd already set up some of my things. She gently closed the door, giving me space to process everything that had happened. Later that evening, Sarah knocked softly and brought me a mug of hot chocolate. She sat beside me on the bed, not pushing me to talk, just being there. Eventually, I found my voice. "Why didn't they want me?" Sarah took a deep breath. She explained as gently as she could that Frank and Linda had decided to sell their house and use the money for investments and traveling. "They'd been planning this for a while," she said. "It wasn't my fault. I didn't understand everything about investments or why adults would choose money over their own child, but one thing was crystal clear: I hadn't been part of their plans for the future." "Will you leave me too?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Tom, who had been standing in the doorway, came in and sat on my other side. They both wrapped their arms around me in a way Frank and Linda never had. "Never," Tom said firmly. "You're our daughter now, Jenna. We've always wanted you." It was the first time in my life I felt truly wanted, truly safe. The transition wasn't seamless, of course. I had nightmares. I'd wake up confused about where I was. I struggled with trust. But day by day, I began to understand what having real parents was like. Sarah came to my parent-teacher conferences and beamed with pride when my teachers praised my work. Tom taught me to ride a bike properly and cheered louder than anyone when I finally managed without training wheels. They helped me with homework, kissed my scrapes when I fell, and hugged me every single day, sometimes multiple times. When summer came around, they took me on vacation with them to the beach. I built sandcastles with Tom and collected seashells with Sarah. We took family photos that they proudly displayed on their mantle. I was included in everything, never an afterthought. About 3 months after moving in with the Clarks, I rode my bike to my old neighborhood. I'm not sure what drew me there, closure, perhaps, or just morbid curiosity. The house looked different already. A new family had moved in. I could see children playing in what used to be our backyard. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway that Frank would have never allowed. Standing there on the sidewalk, watching strangers inhabit my former home, I realized something important: Frank and Linda really were gone. They had sold the house, just as Sarah had explained. They had erased all evidence of their life here, including me, and moved on. Surprisingly, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Something hardened inside me that day. I decided I was done loving people who didn't love me back. The Williamses weren't my parents anymore, not in any way that mattered. I had real parents now. That night at dinner, I called Sarah Mom for the first time. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled so widely it must have hurt her cheeks. I called Tom Dad right after, and he had to excuse himself from the table for a minute to compose himself. When he came back, his eyes were red, but he looked happier than I'd ever seen him. High school came with its own challenges, but I had a solid foundation at home. I made friends, joined clubs, and worked hard in my classes. Tom and Sarah encouraged me every step of the way. When college acceptance letters started coming in, I got a partial scholarship to Westfield State in the neighboring state. It wasn't Ivy League, but it had a good marketing program, and it was close enough that I could visit home regularly. The scholarship wouldn't cover everything, but Tom and Sarah never hesitated. "We've been saving for your education since the day you came to live with us," Mom told me, showing me their special college fund account. I worked part-time jobs throughout college, waitressing, campus bookstore, tutoring freshmen, so I could have my own spending money. I never wanted to be a financial burden. With my first real paycheck, I bought Mom a silver bracelet and Dad a nice watch. They both cried when they opened the gifts. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm in the same state as my college. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a foot in the door. I got an apartment with a college friend and started building my adult life. Every other weekend, I'd drive home to visit Mom and Dad. We'd have Sunday dinners, and I'd help Dad in the garden or go shopping with Mom. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I got promoted after my first year. I dated a little, though nothing serious. I called my parents at least twice a week, just to chat. I was happy. And then, when I was 25, everything changed again. It was a Tuesday when I got the call. I was at work, preparing a presentation for a client, when my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally I might have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Jenna Clark?" a formal voice asked. I confirmed it was me. "This is Officer Ramirez from the Riverside Police Department. I'm afraid there's been an accident." The world seemed to stop spinning as I listened to him explain. A truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. He'd crossed the center line. Mom and Dad had been driving home from their weekly grocery trip. They died instantly, the officer assured me, as if that would somehow make it better. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I know my boss drove me home when I couldn't stop shaking. I know I packed a bag. I know I drove the 3 hours back to my hometown in a fog of disbelief. The house, their house, was exactly as they'd left it that morning. Mail on the counter. Half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table. 2 coffee mugs in the sink. They were gone, just like that, the only people who had ever truly loved me. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and paperwork. I moved through it all like a robot, checking tasks off a list. Choose a casket. Select funeral flowers. Write an obituary. Call their friends. Each decision felt impossible, yet somehow I made them all. The funeral was well attended. Mom and Dad had been loved in the community. Their neighbors, colleagues, and friends from church filled the chapel. Everyone told me how sorry they were, how wonderful Tom and Sarah had been, how proud they were of me. I nodded and thanked them automatically, their words washing over me without sinking in. After the service, a man in a gray suit approached me. He introduced himself as Robert Kendall, Mom and Dad's attorney. He asked if I could meet him at his office the following day to discuss their will. I agreed without much thought. It seemed like just another task on my endless list. Mr. Kendall's office was small but tidy, with law books lining the walls and certificates displayed behind his desk. He offered me tea, which I declined. I just wanted to get this over with. "Your parents were very organized people," he began, opening a folder. "They updated their will regularly, most recently just last year." I nodded, not surprised. Mom and Dad had always been responsible, always planning ahead. "They left everything to you, Jenna. The house is fully paid off, and there's a substantial savings account as well, approximately $700,000. The number struck me like a physical blow. $700,000? I had no idea they had saved so much. They were quite frugal, Mr. Kendall explained, seeming to read my thoughts. And they made some smart investments over the years. They wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. Even in death, they were still looking out for me. The realization brought fresh tears to my eyes. In the weeks that followed, I took a leave of absence from my job and stayed in my parents' house, my house now. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to my apartment and resuming normal life. Nothing felt normal anymore. How could it, when the two people who had given me everything were gone? I spent my days sorting through their belongings. It was painful but necessary work. I donated their clothes to charity, knowing they would have wanted that. I kept special items, Dad's favorite sweater, Mom's jewelry box, the photo albums they'd so carefully maintained. Everything else, I organized and packed away. One evening, as I was going through their financial papers, I found a folder labeled Jenna, Adoption. Inside were all the legal documents from when they had adopted me 15 years ago. Reading through them brought back painful memories of being abandoned, but also deep gratitude for the life Mom and Dad had given me. At the back of the folder was a handwritten letter addressed to me, dated just a few years ago. Mom's elegant handwriting covered both sides of the page. Dearest Jenna, if you're reading this, something has happened to us. We want you to know that adopting you was the greatest joy of our lives. We had tried for years to have a child of our own before we met you, but it wasn't meant to be. When your biological parents approached us about adopting you, we couldn't believe our luck. Though the circumstances were difficult, you were the answer to our prayers. You made us a family. We hope we've given you the love and security you deserve. Always remember how cherished you are. All our love, Mom and Dad. I held the letter to my chest and sobbed. They had wanted me, from the beginning, they had wanted me. After a month in my childhood home, I made a decision. I would resign from my job and move back permanently. I could find work here, in the town where I'd been happiest. It felt right to honor Mom and Dad by living in the home they had created, continuing the life they had built. My former employer was understanding. I gave notice on my apartment, packed up my things, and officially moved into my parents' house. It felt strange at first, sleeping in what had been the guest room while leaving their bedroom untouched. Eventually, I'd have to decide what to do with their personal spaces, but not yet. I wasn't ready. I applied for marketing positions locally and was offered a job at Reynolds Brooks, a mid-sized agency with some impressive clients. The salary was actually better than what I'd been making before, and the work was interesting. I threw myself into it, grateful for the distraction. Slowly, I established a new routine: work during the week, grocery shopping on Saturdays, house maintenance on Sundays. I made a few friends at the office but mostly kept to myself. I wasn't ready for real socializing yet. 4 months after the funeral, I was finally starting to feel like I could breathe again. Then came the Saturday morning that changed everything, again. I was in the kitchen, making coffee and planning my day, when the doorbell rang. It was early, not yet 9 o'clock. I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious and slightly annoyed, I went to answer it. I swung the door open and froze. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. Standing on my porch were 2 people I hadn't seen in 15 years. They looked older, more worn, but I recognized them instantly. Frank and Linda Williams. My biological parents. Jenna, Linda said, her voice cracking. She reached out as if to hug me. Oh, my baby. I stumbled backward, out of reach. This couldn't be happening, it had to be a nightmare. Frank stepped forward. We heard about Tom and Sarah. We're so sorry, sweetheart, we came as soon as we could. As soon as they could? It had been months since the funeral. And sweetheart? He'd never called me that in my life. What are you doing here? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely audible. We missed you, Linda said, tears in her eyes. We wanted to check on you, make sure you're okay. They tried to step inside, but I blocked the doorway with my body. No way were they entering this house, the home my real parents had made for me. What do you want? I demanded, finding my voice. They exchanged a look that sent warning bells ringing in my head. We just want to talk, Frank said. Can we come in? No, I replied firmly, but I'll meet you at Rosie's Cafe around the corner in an hour, we can talk there. They seemed disappointed but nodded in agreement. As they turned to leave, I noticed something I'd missed in my initial shock. They had suitcases with them. At 10 o'clock sharp, I walked into Rosie's cafe. Frank and Linda were already there, sitting at a corner table. They looked up as I entered, their faces lighting up with fake smiles. I walked over slowly and sat down across from them, keeping my back straight and my face expressionless. "Thank you for meeting us," Linda began. She looked older than I remembered, with deep lines around her mouth and eyes. Frank had lost most of his hair and gained weight. They both looked tired, worn down. Not like the sleek, well-dressed couple who had so casually discarded me. "What do you want?" I asked again, not bothering with pleasantries. Linda's smile faltered. She glanced at Frank, who cleared his throat. "We heard about what happened to Tom and Sarah. Terrible tragedy. They were good people." "The best people," I corrected, "the best parents anyone could ask for." Linda flinched at that, but continued, "Yes, well, when we heard, we were worried about you. All alone, dealing with such a loss. I've been managing fine for months. How did you even find out?" "Small town news travels," Frank said vaguely. "And we've thought about you over the years, Jenna, more than you know." I doubted that very much. Linda's eyes suddenly welled with tears. She reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. "The thing is, sweetie," she said, her voice cracking, "we've had some hard times. We spent all our money. The investments didn't work out, we lost everything." Ah, there it was, the real reason for their unexpected appearance. "We don't have a home anymore," Frank continued, looking down at the table. "No jobs, nothing. When we heard about Tom and Sarah, we thought maybe you could help us. We're your real parents, after all, your only family now." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absolute audacity of these people was astonishing. "My real parents died in a car accident 4 months ago," I said when I could speak again. "As for being my only family, you gave up that right when you packed my bags and pushed me out the door when I was 10 years old." "We didn't understand what we were doing," Linda pleaded. "We were selfish. We've regretted it ever since." "Really?" "Because you never once tried to contact me in 15 years. We thought you were better off with Tom and Sarah," Frank said. "They could give you what we couldn't." "That's convenient," I replied, "but what you really mean is, now that you need something, you suddenly remember you have a daughter." Linda was openly crying now. "Please, Jenna. We know you inherited their house. And their money. We just need a place to stay for a while. Until we get back on our feet." So they knew about my inheritance, that explained everything. I stood up, took my wallet from my purse, and placed enough cash on the table to cover their coffee. "This is the only thing you'll ever get from me," I said quietly. "I don't need you, I don't want you, and I certainly don't owe you anything." I walked out without looking back, ignoring Linda's sobs and Frank's calls to wait. For 2 blessed days, I thought that was the end of it. Then, coming home from work on Monday evening, I saw an old, beat-up car parked in front of my house. Frank and Linda were sitting inside, watching my driveway. I pulled up beside them and got out of my car. "What are you doing here?" "We have nowhere else to go," Frank said simply. "We'll stay right here until you change your mind." "You're trespassing," I warned. "We're parked on a public street," Linda countered. "We're not breaking any laws." I shook my head in disbelief and went inside, locking the door behind me. Through the living room window, I could see them settling in for the night. They had blankets, food wrappers littered the dashboard. They were serious about staying. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. By morning, they were still there. I left for work, avoiding eye contact as I passed their car. When I returned that evening and found them still parked in the same spot, something inside me snapped. I went inside, picked up my phone, and called the police. "There's a suspicious vehicle parked outside my house," I told the dispatcher. "The occupants have been there for days, watching my property. I'm concerned for my safety." 20 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. I watched from the window as 2 officers approached Frank and Linda's car. There was a heated discussion. I saw Linda pointing at my house, becoming increasingly agitated. Frank was shouting something. I opened my front door and stepped onto the porch. One of the officers walked over to me. "Ma'am, these individuals claim to be your parents." "My parents died 4 months ago in a car accident," I replied calmly. "I've never seen these people before." Linda screamed from the car, "She's lying, I'm her mother, tell them, Jenna." The officer looked at me questioningly. "My name is Jenna Clark," I said firmly. "My parents were Tom and Sarah Clark. These people are strangers, and they've been stalking me." The officers returned to Frank and Linda, their demeanor now more stern. After another heated exchange, Frank started the car. The officers stood watching as they slowly drove away. I never saw them again after that night. Sometimes I wonder what happened to them, whether they found somewhere to go, whether they had any money left. But the wondering is brief and without emotion. The people who truly loved me, who chose me and wanted me and built their lives around me, they're gone now. But they left me with so much more than a house and savings. They gave me love, they gave me strength, they showed me what family really means. I've kept their home exactly as they would have wanted it. I'm building my career, making my own way. And someday, I hope to create my own family, one built on the love and lessons Tom and Sarah taught me.